The following video is rated KAG. It contains logical discourse and sound reasoning that some may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. To the liberal mainstream media machine, Jim Morrison famously said, "Whoever controls the media controls the mind." And today, you have gained the control of the minds of millions. But Robertson Davies famously wrote, "The eye sees only what the mind is prepared to comprehend." Well, we the people have our eyes wide open. We've seen what you've been up to and we know what your agenda is. So on behalf of the American people, I have some questions for you. When can we expect you to stop making people panic over a virus with a survival rate greater than 99% for those under 70, when the president himself recovered from it in only a weekend? Why is it that you refuse to address the damning evidence on Hunter Biden's laptop, instead choosing to focus on anonymous sources accusing President Trump of everything under the sun with hardly any evidence whatsoever? What's the point of calling yourself the news if you're hell-bent on being biased and catering only to those who agree with you? Remember 15 days to slow the spread? That was well over 200 days ago now. How long will you use the American economy as collateral damage by insisting that we live in fear indefinitely? Flu deaths this year have become almost non-existent, and we haven't heard a word from y'all about that. That wouldn't be because they're just called COVID deaths now, would it? Does the acronym CNN stand for Cable News Network or for Chinese Nationalist News? Serious question, because we really can't tell anymore. And since you love China so much, do you realize they imprisoned 48 journalists, the most of any country in the world, just last year? What is it that is so hard about simply telling the truth and leaving your opinions out of it? Journalism is defined as the activity or profession of writing for newspapers, magazines, or news websites, or preparing news to be broadcast. That's it. You do know that, right? Why do you continue to cover up the Hunter Biden scandal, knowing full well that if it was Trump or one of his kids, you would give it 24/7 news coverage? At the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, you all were forecasting more than 2 million American deaths from COVID-19. Since the death toll is only roughly 10% of that number, when can we expect you to thank President Trump for saving nearly 2 million lives? Never? I thought so. At what point are you going to realize that the more you censor us, the more curious you will make people as to why we're such a threat? It's called the Streisand effect, in case you didn't know. Why do you insist on focusing on turning the criminals who get shot and killed by the police into martyrs, instead of focusing on the many minorities who've taken it upon themselves to rise above the status quo and better their own station in life? When you were learning how to become journalists, did your instructors teach you how to use facts and integrity, or did they just teach you how to write gossip columns? Instead of focusing 100% of your coverage on those who have died from COVID-19, why haven't you given equal coverage to the millions upon millions of people who have recovered from COVID-19? Can you honestly say you apply the same level of professional skepticism and objectivity to liberals as you do conservatives? How can you ignore all the actual and proven facts about Democrats just to focus instead on lies surrounding Republicans? Did you know there's a difference between reporting the news and being the news? Or is that concept just too hard for you to comprehend? And speaking of comprehension, what does it say about your average viewer if you have to twist the facts and repeat the same lie over and over again just for them to believe it? Instead of placing blame on police officers who shoot to defend themselves while being charged by violent criminals, why don't you instead place that blame squarely on yourselves for repeating the same lie that black people should fear each and every police officer without cause? If you claim to care about the facts, why are facts the things you most consistently withhold to make people believe the narrative that you demand that they accept? If your narrative is always predetermined, why not just call yourselves partisan activists instead of journalists? Because at the end of the day, that's what we know you really are. And Fox News, do you think you get a free pass? Because if so, think again. We still haven't forgotten you took a left turn years ago. One America News Network. How does it feel to be one of the last true news networks in America? Patriots around the world, thank you. Okay, we're halfway there, so here's an easy one. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? And no, the chicken is not racist. Why do you spend so much time complaining about the lack of masks and social distancing at Trump rallies, but turn a blind eye to it when you see rioters and looters take to the streets to burn their own communities to the ground? And while we're talking about masks, why do your own news correspondents rip them off as soon as they think the cameras have stopped rolling? Is it more profitable to make the news or report the news? Don't answer. We already know. You all were breathlessly talking about a recession or an outright depression only a few months ago, but now you largely ignore or go out of your way to downplay the new record GDP growth rate we just experienced. So my question is, why are you actively rooting for America to fail? Instead of writing books about lies about Trump, why don't you write books about something you're actually good at, like pandering to black people, for example? Did you know that if you type in www.antifa.com, it redirects you to Joe Biden's website? And do you think that's just a coincidence? And while we're talking about anti-fascists, do any of you find it strange that they magically appear in any city where a police officer shoots a black individual in less than 24 hours? You've been carrying the water for BLM for years now. So would you mind telling us how much funding they've given to minority communities out of the millions of dollars they've received over the past few years? If the truth is what you claim to support, why do you go out of your way to avoid it every single day? And if democracy dies in darkness, like the Washington Post loves to say, I guess it's a good thing America is a constitutional republic, not a democracy, am I right? How can you expect President Trump to commit to a peaceful transfer of power when you have been resisting him every step of the way for the last 4 years? And how can you insist that voting by mail is a trustworthy way to elect a president when there have been multiple instances of attempted voter fraud in 2020 alone? If voting by mail is so safe, how about all of you demand that your next paycheck be sent to you in the mail, in cash? Put your money where your mouth is, literally. Are you secretly hoping Trump will get reelected so you'll have job security for the next 4 years? Because you know damn well your usefulness to the world will expire at the end of his presidency. How many peaceful protests, riots, do you predict we'll have after the election? Please round to the nearest blue city. How can you claim to have a moral compass when you're constantly running defense for the party that is full of people who have been tied to child abuse, child exploitation, and God knows what else? When will you take responsibility for the violence we see against our police officers because of your continued anti-police rhetoric? If silence is compliance, as you love to say, then their blood is on your hands, is it not? You've seen and reported on what the left is willing to do to gain power. Rioting, looting, and murdering Trump supporters in the streets. How are you okay with any of that? When your paychecks are being signed, are they signed in English or Chinese? And speaking of paychecks, do you get a bonus every time you tell a lie? If you wanted to be taken seriously, why have you chosen to ignore the multiple stories of children being rescued from child sex trafficking while you continue to rage against Trump 24/7? How can you demand that we trust you when you mock, belittle, and demean half the country on a daily basis? Have you ever considered that there's a greater chance that the tens of millions of Americans out there are right and that it's you're the ones who are wrong? When the Trump era comes to an end and we look back at this chapter in American history, how does it feel to know you'll be remembered as the most bitter, divisive, biased, subversive media machine in all of human history? Take some time to think about that while you still can, because your time is running out. And that's not a threat, that's a promise. The American people await your response. And where we go one, we go all.
The first revolution is when you change your mind about how you look at things and see that there might be another way to look at it that you have not been shown. The revolution will not be televised, and be no rerun, brothers and sisters. The revolution will be live.